In 1820, an Englishwoman named Annie married the heir of a great house on the north coast of Jamaica, and the story the island tells says she murdered 3 husbands and a string of enslaved lovers inside it, and that her ghost has never left. The documented record says she murdered no one, and the record is worse than the ghost. That is Rose Hall, and it is number 1 on this list. Before we reach it, there is a hillside that came down on a working estate and buried everyone on it, a stone house built for the purpose of killing travelers, a church in Cane Country that its own congregation abandoned to the Duppies, and a great house where a country singer heard a woman walking at night. Jamaica has more than 700 ruined estates, and the Duppy tradition, the island's own account of its dead, has claimed a remarkable number of them. If that is the kind of record you want more of, the subscribe button is right there. What follows is 15 of the plantations and great houses that record has marked, counting down toward the most haunted house in the Caribbean. Number 15. The estate a university was built on. Mona, St. Andrew. The campus of the University of the West Indies outside Kingston sits on the ground of the old Mona and Papineau sugar estates, and the cut-stone aqueduct that once fed the works still crosses the lawns between the halls of residence. Enslaved people lived and died on this ground for generations, and the students who sleep beside the ruins have told their own stories about the campus at night for as long as the university has stood. The aqueduct is still standing between the dormitories. Number 14. The house where a countess died young, Craigton, St. Andrew. In the hills above Kingston, an old coffee plantation, Great House, became a summer residence of the British governors of Jamaica, and in 1842, the newly arrived governor, the Earl of Elgin, bought it to escape the heat of the capital. On the 7th of June, 1843, his young wife Elizabeth, Countess of Elgin, died at Craigton at the age of 22, and her duppy is said to haunt the house to this day. The house is still in the hills, and the story is still told in them. Number 13. The house the poet's family built, Greenwood, St. James. On a rise above the coast east of Montego Bay stands a great house raised by the Barretts, the family of the poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning, its walls built to stop cannonballs, and its rooms still holding the furniture, instruments, and books of the family that owned hundreds of enslaved people on the estates below it. The house survived when estates around it burned, and visitors walk through rooms arranged as if the owners stepped out and will return. The Barretts' possessions are still in their places. Number 12, the oldest English house still lived in, Halse Hall, Clarendon. The Spanish ran cattle here and called it Hato de Buena Vista, and in 1655, when the English took the island, the land was granted to Major Thomas Halse, who built a house with thick walls as a rallying point for defense. The family burial ground on the property holds Thomas Halse, who died in 1702, and in December of 1835 the owners received £3,523 in compensation when the 172 Africans they had enslaved were emancipated. It is called the oldest English building in Jamaica, still used as a residence, and the tombs are still on the grounds beside it. Number 11. The fortress the Fever built, Stokes Hall, St. Thomas. In 1656, Luke Stokes, the governor of Nevis, brought about 1,600 settlers to the swampy southeast corner of Jamaica, and within a couple of years he, his wife, and 2/3 of the settlers were dead of fever. The survivors moved to higher ground, and the great house his children built there was raised more like a fortress than a home, with gun holes that are still evident in the walls. The earthquake of 1907 destroyed the house, and 3 towers, a kitchen foundation, and a water tank are what remain above the cane. The gun holes are still in the walls. Number 10. The works the forest was given back, Kenilworth, Hanover. The estate first appears in the crop accounts of 1757 under its old name, Magady, and the stone sugar works raised on it, the boiling house, the distillery, and a limestone building with a semicircular stair to an arched door are counted among the finest 18th century industrial ruins in Jamaica. Beyond the works is a small walled burial ground with a slab for Thomas Blagrove, dead on the 8th of July, 1755, in the 22nd year of his life. By 1882, most of the property was already listed as wood and ruinate. The stair still climbs to a door that opens on nothing. Number 9. The picnic lawn over a burial yard, Seville, St. Anne. On 300 acres above St. Anne's Bay, a Taino village, a Spanish capital, and an English sugar plantation lie stacked on one property, and for almost 2 centuries enslaved Africans lived and died on this ground. Between 1987 and 1993, archaeologists lifted 4 sets of human remains from the African burial yard. 3 were reburied here on Emancipation Day in 1997, and 1 was carried home to Ghana in 1998. The full size of the burial yard has never been mapped. The lawns where visitors picnic are still on top of it. Quick thing before the second half. Drop a comment with the parish you are watching from and tap the like if the list is earning it, because the ground gets heavier from here. And number 1, the house with an invented ghost and a real body count, is still ahead. Number 8, the castle with no explanation, Colbeck, St. Catherine. In open country north of Old Harbor stands the largest building group to survive from 17th century Jamaica, brick and limestone with tower-like corners, tied to a colonel who came with the invasion of 1655 and died in 1682, and no record says who designed it, when it was finished, or whether anyone ever lived in it. The people of the district have given it the stories the archive never could. The walls still stand to their full height in an empty field. Number 7. The estate where the war began at Easter, Frontier, St. Mary. Before dawn on Easter Monday of 1760, an enslaved man remembered as Tacky led the uprising that began on the Frontier and Trinity estates near Port Maria, the start of one of the largest slave revolts of the 18th century Caribbean, and the reprisals that followed killed hundreds. The Duppy tradition has kept its own account of that ground ever since. The cane land where it started is still worked, and the dead of 1760 were never counted in full. Number 6. The fire that could be seen for miles, Kensington, St. James. On the 27th of December 1831, the trash house at Kensington Estate in the hills of St. James was set alight, and the fire, visible across western Jamaica, was the signal that began the Baptist War, the largest slave rebellion in the history of the British Caribbean. About 200 enslaved people, and 14 of the planter class died in the fighting, and more than 300 were executed afterward in rapid courts. The estate where the signal fire was lit is farmland today, and the people who work it know exactly what happened on it. The hills where the fire showed are still bare to the coast. Number 5. The house built to kill its guests, Edinburgh Castle, St. Anne. In the 1760s, in the remote Pedro district, a Scotsman named Lewis Hutchinson built a 2-towered stone house on the road through the hills and shot the travelers who passed it, throwing the bodies into a sinkhole on his land. When the authorities searched the house in 1773, they found 43 watches that did not belong to him, and he was hanged in Spanish Town that March. Locals say his ghost still walks the ruin, and the district has never fully settled around it. The 2 towers are still on the hill. Number 4. The house where the singer heard footsteps, Cinnamon Hill, St. James. An 18th century Barrett Great House stands above the coast east of Montego Bay, its family graves on the property, and in the 20th century, it became the Jamaican home of the country singer Johnny Cash. He wrote inside its walls, including a song in 1973 about the woman said to haunt the estate next door, singing that he could still feel her presence around the great house, and his household kept its own accounts of the presences at Cinnamon Hill itself. A golf course runs past the property now. The Barrett graves are still beside the fairway. Number 3. The church its congregation gave up, Mile Gully, Manchester. In the old estate country of North Manchester stands the abandoned St. George's Anglican Church, which the district calls Duppy Church, its doors and pews long gone, its windows broken, and its yard crowded with tombstones dating back to the 1800s, the dead of the plantations around it. The story holds that the congregation abandoned it after the Duppies would not leave it. Drivers tell of passengers picked up on that road at night who were not living, and people say faint organ music has been heard outside the ruin. Most residents avoid it at all costs. The graves are still gathered around the empty church. Number 2. The estate a mountain buried, Judgment Cliff, St. Thomas. On the morning of the 7th of June, 1692, the same earthquake that drowned Port Royal shook a hillside loose above the Yalas Valley, and a mass of rock slid down onto a working plantation and buried it with the people on it, at least 19 dead under the rock. The survivors named the scar Judgment Cliff because the Duppy tradition and the church agreed for once that God had brought the mountain down on a cruel master, and the old story says only one man lived because he was away. No one has ever built on the land it covered. The scar is still on the mountain, and the monument to the dead is lost in the bush. Number 1. The house with an invented ghost and a real body count, Rose Hall, St. James. This is the one we opened on. The great house was built in the 1770s at the center of a sugar plantation of thousands of acres, and the legend, first printed in a pamphlet in 1868, says Annie Palmer, the White Witch, murdered 3 husbands and her enslaved lovers here, and rides the property still. The record is plainer. The real Annie married into the estate in 1820 and died in her bed, and the ghost was given its final shape by a novelist. What is documented is that more than 100 enslaved people at a time were held and worked on this ground, and it is their dead, not hers, that the house actually has. Today, it is the most famous haunted attraction in the Caribbean, with candlelit night tours through the halls, and after a buried plantation at number 2, the top of this list is a house whose real horror is the part of the tour told fastest. The lights go out in the great house every evening, and the visitors keep coming to meet a ghost that never lived, on ground full of people who did. That is 15 estates across one island, a countess, a killer, a church full of graves, a buried plantation, and a witch who was invented after the fact, and almost every one of them is reachable today, signposted, standing in open country, avoided by the people who live closest to them. 15 is nowhere near the full count of what the plantations left behind. Stay subscribed and we will go looking for the rest.